Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, our next panelist needs no introduction. Shankar Sharma, Vice Chairman and Joint Managing Director of First Global. Mr. Sharma has been an active, voluble and vocal participant and observer of markets for so many years now. And he joins us here today on this special occasion to talk to us about overseas investing in the time of COVID. Hi, Mr. Sharma. This is Sriram here from Economic Times. How are you, sir?
Yes, hi. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for taking the time out, and great to have you here. And as usual, you are one of the most, sought after, the most interesting speaker that one looks forward to. I believe that you want to talk about overseas investing in the time of COVID.
Yeah, that's what I've been asked to speak about. Okay, so the data for and the case for global investing has been very crystal clear for a pretty long time. And in particular, if you look at the period of the last 10 years, which is as long as the period you can take, it has been very clear that India has delivered virtually no, in fact, negative returns in dollar terms. Okay. And the reason for that is very simple, that over the last few years, overall growth rates in India have been trending down. And because of the growth rates trending down, you're seeing a trending down of equity market returns, while the currency has kept weakening. So every Indian has become poorer in dollar terms over the last 10 years. And,
right.
And if you take just the near term, which is, for example, let us take 2019 as the nearest full year that we have. Globally, markets are up between 25 and 40, and actually 50%. So Russia was nearly 50%, and the US was around mid-30s, and then you had even European countries were up 25, 28%. So Italy or Spain, etc. While India barely, it was just 8 or 9% up. So, and this year it becomes even worse because India is along with this year, almost at the bottom 5 or 7 markets in the country in 2020 year to. So the point is that India has had delivered terrific returns going up to about 2009 or 10 in dollar terms. And after that, the whole sort of whatever has happened subsequently has led to virtually no gains being made by Indian investors in dollar terms. And in contrast, if any Indian investor had allocated even a moderate amount of capital to global diversification, and by diversification, let me make it clear, diversification does not mean going and buying NASDAQ P500. That is, and frankly, downright stupid thing to do, because it might be doing well today, it might not do well tomorrow. And in fact, if you look at the history of global markets over the last 25 years, the leadership changes dramatically, practically every year. So last year, Russia was up 50%. NASDAQ was not up 50%. Okay. Now this year, NASDAQ is the best performing market, while Russia is not. So things change. So just going and blindly buying an ETF is not going to be a solution, or buying a feeder fund, which is very expensive because you have the overseas cost and the local cost. That's also not a solution. So you need to do it smartly. And the second thing is not getting overexposed to just equities alone, even when you go global. Because there are many asset classes. There are very interesting fixed income securities you can buy globally. I mean, I'll give you one example. So the BPCL bond itself, okay, Bharat Petroleum company, we all know. The bond itself today is yielding, I think, a YTM of nearly, in dollar terms, maybe around 21%.
Wow. Okay.
With a, and it was yielding around 9 or 10%. Okay, I'm talking about with a bit of leverage, because you can borrow today at less than 1%. I mean, that's a kind of return even in well-known companies you can make. Forget about Chinese companies and Italian companies. So short point is, Indians do need to start thinking of diversifying their wealth outside just the Indian equities and what I call SCARs, which means single currency, single country, single asset risk. You need to get out of this whole thing that everything has to be only in India. And again, the personal example, we decided to do this about 24 years, 23 years back, and it has been a very rewarding journey, because we couldn't find an Amazon in 2001 or an Apple in 2002, all of them between 70 to 150 times up since then. So there is huge money to be made abroad. There is money to be made in India, but in dollar terms, it's very hard to beat that hurdle rate of the dollar depreciation.
Right. Okay. So what would you say? What would you say should an investor do now in the time of a pandemic, when globally equities are cratering and economies are cratering? You don't know what the future is going to be like. You don't know whether a vaccine is going to come and how long it's going to take. What is the best option for an investor now? Should he stay safe? Should he put everything in cash, or should he put at least half of his money in cash? Should he wait for an opportune time, or should he go out and do what you're suggesting? Diversify, look to global markets, look to dollar returns.
So basically the first and foremost thing the investor needs to understand is this. There is no okay. People have strategies, different thinking. If you were to draw it up into one strategy, I will only say you should have not less than 20-25 positions in your overall portfolio. Not any position should be having more than 5%. That's rule number one. Rule number two, have some allocations towards global investing. Rule number three, in this environment in particular, have very tight risk management, extremely tight. I mean, I cannot overstress the importance of this. We have seen in the month of March, you have given up gains you made over a few years. In just 1 month, you're down 25, 30, 40%. It's game over. So in this environment in particular, be very, very cautious. All right. Once you do all that, you will find that there are pockets in the market, even in India, for example, just in the last 1 month's time. Many stocks have done phenomenally well. I'm not talking the beaten down ones. I'm talking the good ones. So I'm talking pharmaceuticals, I'm talking chemicals. And in our portfolio, we have 25% chemicals, 25% pharma. So I'm saying there is money to be made, but stay away from the most dangerous spots in the market, which are frankly the leverage space. So you have the NBFCs, you have banks, all those are problem areas. Stay safe right now, not just health-wise, but also wealth-wise.
Right. So do you think we are, I'm just taking on the point that you have made about the banks and the NBFCs. Given whatever is happening in the economy today, are we headed for another banking crisis like what happened in 2015?
That's a very, very direct and a very big question, and the reply needs to be obviously very tempered because I don't want to sound alarmist or anything of that sort, but let's just say in a very understated way, it's pretty clear that large-scale business damage has happened and is happening.
Is happening as we speak,
Everybody, you don't need to be a genius to see what is happening right now, right? Literally millions of individuals, thousands of businesses are going to probably never be able to come back.
Right.
Like, for example, a banker was telling me that I've lent to a multiplex company, which was a terrific business, 3 months back. Today, do you see multiplexes going back to their original glory anytime soon? Obviously not. And there's no fault of theirs. It's just an extraordinary situation. And in this situation, to say that people will be able to repay their loans, their EMIs, or even a business which has taken a MSME that has taken loans is a bit of a far cry. So that will affect balance sheets of NBFCs.
Right.
I won't go as far as this, but definitely our policymakers must be proactive, because remember, contagion is something that can just go out of, it is by definition something that is uncontrolled.
Right.
And you need to nip it in the bud. You need to be proactive. Don't wait for it to start, because once it has started, then whatever you do is just going to fall short of what is ideal. And then if you actually put in 100 rupees today, you could prevent a contagion. But tomorrow when it starts, even 1,000 is too little.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some questions from our audience, from our viewers. One such question is from Mr. Nikhil Girme from Pune. And he's taking on the point that you are talking about overseas investing. He wants to know whether it's a good time to invest in the US, and what is the best vehicle? Is it MFs? Is it direct investing? How do you invest in the US if you really want to? Is it a good time now?
No, so I am not here to give individual advice because, obviously these things are a little bit, it's a wide topic. How exactly you do that? There are ways to do that. One is to get into a managed product. Like, for example, we offer managed products. The other is to do an ETF. The other is to open your own account at a broker and start trading. There are many, many ways. You need to figure out what is best for you. In my view, even India is very difficult for most people to figure out. Forget about the world. It's a very complex, complicated place. To choose your fund managers very wisely. That's my single biggest advice.
Right. Okay, that's very good advice as well. Mr. Arvind Choksi from Burhanpur wants to know as to what is it that is really driving the Indian markets. We saw this performance in April. We saw what happened in March. Last smart recovery. Now I asked this question to some of the other panelists as well. Do you think that this is a dead cat bounce? Is this just a bear market rally that is going to fizzle out? Maybe May will be very different. What is it that is really driving this, and is it here to stay?
No, but why do we think that we are the only markets that have rallied in in the month of April? Every market in the world has rallied.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bonds have rallied. Junk bonds have rallied. Investment grade has rallied. Everything has rallied. It's just that March was a 30% down month. When you have a vertical fall like that, it's inevitable. I mean, does anybody expect, or did anybody expect that market would fall another 20% in April? Obviously not. You're down 30. You're done for at least a few months. And in fact, my view was we would rally to 33, 34,000. I said it on one of the programs. And we have gotten there. But the cautious part is, don't start reading too much into this. In markets, all kinds of sort of fakery happens.
Right. Absolutely.
And markets and the real economy can be very divergent. In fact, they have diverged quite remarkably in the last couple of years in India. Even in this rally, don't start believing too much. We have played it, but do we believe it? No. We are very cautious. But we have gone 100% invested. We have made 15-16% in this month. But don't start just becoming a person who says, okay, all is well and the whole entire problem is over. Don't start believing.
Right, absolutely. You made this point about multiplexes some minutes back, and some questions from our viewers want to know about the stocks of the sectors that are going to be very badly hit and which ones will actually lead the new rally going forward. Mr. Kaushik Pramar, for instance, from Mumbai wants to know which is the worst hit and the best, and the companies and the sectors that will do well, and the worst hit sectors, and which will be the next big thing that will lead the market rally upwards. That is something that is coming from Mr. Abir Kanjilal from Calcutta. How do you respond to that?
Okay, so the good and the bad is pretty clear if you look at the day in the month of April itself. So you had pharma which started rallying from late March.
Right, absolutely.
We had a very good month of April.
Yeah.
But also, let me tell you that again, India is not the only pharma market which has rallied. Globally, many pharma companies have rallied. A large part of what we have seen is not just isolated, whether the broad market or even individual sectors.
Right.
Okay, and then chemicals have done quite well. Some of the FMCGs have done okay in this last month, not right. Because clearly it exists. They have also had a rally again. Remember, you can't have a bank like HDFC Bank falling from whatever 1,500 to 800 and then not rallying back up. It is commonsensical to assume you will see a 10-20% rally from a quality bank that has sold off 50% in the last few months' time. Those things are to be expected. That is what has happened. But again, I'm saying be cautious in this environment. Play it, but don't start believing. It's like watching a movie that you don't go and start saying that, okay, this is just a reality. Watch it like a movie, play the movie, enjoy the movie, but remember, it's still a movie.
Yeah. You talked about banking. Mehul Sangvi from Ahmedabad wants to know what your views on two-wheeler sectors.
On the two-wheelers?
Two-wheelers, yeah.
Okay, so the view there for anything to do with these kinds of purchases is a little bit cautious because remember, two-wheelers are owned by people with moderate incomes, moderate salaries, self-employed. That segment has been very badly hit, and I think they will postpone their purchases. I don't think it's going to go away permanently, but at least for a significant time to come, people will hunker down. They will not spend on something that they can take a metro to instead of buying a bike or buying a scooter. So I think it will get deferred.
That's right. That's right.
Don't permanently, but for some time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Do you see this current time as bad as the 1929 Great Depression? This is from Mr. Lokesh Mundra. How bad do you think this current downturn, this current recession slowdown is?
So, I mean, we wrote an article in the Economic Times. I think in the first week when it was just kind of unfolding, and we said that this is like maybe 10 or maybe 50 times worse than 2008. Obviously, none of us were born in 1929 to know what it was like.
Yeah.
But definitely this one is the mother of all recession. You don't want to like India, see growth which were already very, very poor in India, right? It was 4% or so prior to this crisis. And just 3% growth, which is basically a contraction, 2 plus 2%. That kind of thing is not going to see that number even in 2008. The worst we went to was, I think, 5%.
Right, right.
So it is a major crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. What do you think we can do as a country to grab more business from companies that are leaving China? What do you think we can do to actually, I mean, we see that Vietnam and Indonesia are sometimes seen as a preferred destination. This is a question from Mr. Rajesh Krishnamurthy. He wants to know what is it that we can do to actually get the business from China? How much can we benefit from it, do you think?
Okay, so I got a plan for this, which I have spoken about in the past.
Sure.
And the plan is, first and foremost, I am going to go on a roadshow. If I am the leader of India, I will go on a roadshow of the major economies in the world. Okay, so let's say the US or Europe, Germany, Japan, wherever companies have been outsourcing production to China.
Right.
Okay, I will go and tell them that here's my email ID. Write to me, you want this project, you want this much capital, I will organize it. And here's my team of people also copied on this email. Come here, come to India, I'll be receiving you at the airport. Okay. Second, I'm going to plaster all TV networks and newspapers across America and these countries saying India is open for business. Come to India. Okay, we have the scale, we have the land, we have the capacity. Because remember, Vietnam to Malaysia are still small countries, right? If you start to outsource everything from China, they just don't have the capacity, or Bangladesh, to absorb so much manufacturing. India has huge potential in terms of labor and land, right?
Right, absolutely.
So I will be out there marketing India like crazy as the CEO of India. I mean, and it's not difficult. If I do that, I'm sure I will attract literally tens of billions of dollars of investment into India.
Right.
In fact, I'm surprised by India not being more aggressive in this whole thing.
Yeah. So what do you think? How do you assess the response of the Indian government so far? The fiscal stimulus.
Just one second.
Sure.
See, sometimes call comes which kind of interrupt the word. Yeah, go ahead, please. You're back.
Yeah. How do you assess the response of the Indian government to the fiscal stimulus, whatever it is that the Indian government has promised but not delivered so far? How have they responded to this crisis? How do you assess their performance?
So, I tweeted the other day saying that sometimes it is better not to say something, because otherwise by saying something you will reveal the truth. So I think the government is pretty clear that the scale of stimulus required is probably a little bit beyond what they are able to cough up, and no disagreement with that here, right? So if that is the case, then I don't think there's going to be much coming. That is my assessment, because the government itself is strapped for cash. Even in the budget that we saw on February 1st, there wasn't much. and now the revenue hit for government is massive, to say the least.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should hold out much hope. There will be something, but I don't think it's going to be substantial.
Okay. Do you think we should go ahead and print money?
Look, I mean, that's usual nonsense I'm hearing all the time.
Right.
The reality is that third world countries printing money is a recipe for disaster. Rich countries printing money, hard currency, is a completely different thing. Rich people have different rules in this world. They are different. Let's accept that. India is not there. Once you do that, there will be no coming back from that problem. India, by the way, very important piece of data. India's public debt to GDP, which was 66% in 2014, is now nearer 80% already.
Right.
Just in 6 years, we have climbed 14% points. You're already at a pretty dangerous level. If you stimulate and add 4, 5, 10% of stimulus by way of debt, which is printing money, you are going to be in a serious. So I know it's a rock in a hard place. Okay, that is the reality.
Absolutely. So, what do you think? When do you see us coming out of this situation? Obviously, everything depends on the lockdown lifting, vaccine, whether it is available or not, and how quickly it is available. But when do you see? Do you see the second half of this fiscal probably the time when we can expect some kind of a turnaround? And the alphabet soup, I'm sure you're aware of it. One of our panelists, Abhik Barua, said that he sees it more as a Nike kind of a swish, where we'll come down and then we'll go up like that. Others are talking about a W and then a U. What is your favorite alphabet?
So I think the recovery, let's talk the world. I think the recovery for the richer countries will be very, very quick because they have the capacity to fund the recovery. The capacity for poorer countries, and let me highlight this, is very important. The bottom performing markets in 2020, the bottom 5-6 markets are India, Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia.
So all the BRIC countries.
All of them are running very high deficits. Right. Richer countries will recover very quickly, while the poorer ones will struggle. So India will recover. I don't think it's going to be a very quick recovery because the scale of capital, India, at least frankly, to my mind, putting that much money.
Right. So what are the positives to come out of this particular pandemic? Which are the stocks or the sectors that are really going to benefit? Pharma, we have talked about. We've talked about a bit of chemicals and pharma and healthcare. But what, according to you, are the other sectors that will really do well after the lockdown is lifted?
Sorry.
What sectors and stocks?
You mean the sector that will do well after the lockdown?
After the lockdown, pharma, of course, is healthcare. Pharma are one sector that will probably do well. What about the others?
So once the lockdown goes, automotive. And again, remember, this is not a recommendation. Okay, this is not a recommendation. So please don't take it as that.
Of course.
Once the lockdown goes, you might see a dead cat in the auto sector, because that's the most obvious place where people will say, okay, now transportation will start, people will start going to office or whatever. So at least some movements will start. So I think the autos appear to be a good spot. Obviously, beaten down financials might also rally a bit, but this is not a recommendation. I'm reiterating.
No, of course. And where do you see the Nifty by next year? Nifty and the Sensex?
No, we don't make predictions of this kind.
Okay. And do you think this is how do you think are we going to balance and solve this fiscal deficit problem? Or is it something that is going to be with us for some more years now, given whatever it is that we are doing?
Well,
because the states are
so states are in a deep strife. We all know that. Even, by the way, prior to this problem, states were crying for money, which was, due from the center. So I think states are in a bit of a problem. I think India's fiscal deficit estimates vary between, 7% to 10% of GDP, that kind of number.
Right.
I don't think you are going to be able to unwind that quickly. I think it will take several years. Several years. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great. So on that note, thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Sharma. Thanks for taking the time out, and stay safe, stay well, and all the best to you. And thank you very much for taking the time out.
Thank you.